and welcome back to the CODESHO podcast, everybody.
Welcome.
Today we're going to keep this episode a little bit short. We're actually recording early because you are going on vacation coming up.
Just a little camping trip, yeah.
Yep. So we're going to kind of keep it short because the ladies are wanting us back on the weekday. So we'll keep it short. Basically, what we want to talk about in this episode, though, is just to piggyback on what we talked about in the last episode, which is kind of, I think we've kind of thought about it since we talked to Sean, and kind of the thing that we've come up with is that there's really like sort of two different types of developers, right? So there's kind of the developer that wants to be, well, there's the type that wants to be really good at engineering specifically, and they don't really want to focus on much else, and they just want to become the best software engineer they can. And probably what that means is being on the most refined and solid Scrum team out there, which for some people makes a lot of sense. I think Sean kind of falls into that group. And then there's the other group that kind of wants to be that like all-purpose developer that also kind of gets really involved with the business requirements, right?
Yeah.
So,
Or we don't even have to say, because it's not like we confirmed this with Sean. We don't even have to say there's people who like this or like that. You are, and I think we are that first type, but I don't want to like put words in Sean's mouth. But
the first type or the second type?
I forget which one you said first, but I'm just saying I'm not trying to put words in Sean's mouth. That's and
Oh, right.
But I'm just saying, from the conversation we had, it does seem like there's two different paths. Whether it was like purposeful or not. I think that you seem like and I seem like the type of developer. Again, I forget which one you said first and second, but the type of developer who likes to be like cross-functional or multifunctional and get more involved versus doing. I like the concept of doing a deep dive, but the way that I just behave is more like jumping. It just happens to be jumping around or helping out where I can. Anyway.
Sure. So I think whenever you're that type of developer that gets to exclusively focus on development, you're not really worried about the product side of things. Somebody else is making those decisions. All that you have to focus on is writing good, scalable, testable code. Yeah. I think there's extreme value in that because
of course,
in the same amount of time that you spend in that career, let's say it's 2 years or whatever, and another person spends 2 years, but they're really concerned with pivoting and moving around and working with different technologies and focusing on product problems as opposed to engineering problems. That person that just focused on engineering specifically is probably going to be much more advanced in the language or platform that they work in than the other guy.
Yeah.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
But there is a place for both types of developers.
I think that's the key.
Right. And so I think so. Again, I don't want to I'm just using Sean as an example because we kind of talked to him last. He seems like he sort of more prefers the situation where he gets to focus on his engineering skills. And I think that's because he's, one, just a phenomenal programmer. He's super analytical. And I think the way he sees it, he wants to be the best in the industry at what he does, which is super commendable. And I think you and I both do too. But for some reason, I really enjoy that type of work where I do get to solve business problems and focus on the product. The problem is that doesn't scale. And where does that come in? If you're a business owner and you have these types of employees, you call them linchpins because of that book, yeah. And those people are super valuable. And whenever you first start up a business, you have to have people like that because you couldn't possibly hire a scrum master and a product owner and a project manager. The list goes on. You need people that can wear multiple hats to get you where you want to go.
Yeah.
So once you do hit that place of like, well, we can now afford to have all the right positions. What does that look like? How do you handle that? Or I guess for me, there's so many. I'm kind of thinking of all the different ways we can go about this conversation because we went through this, and now I'm getting a phone call. And
okay. Well, So what? I guess that's the other thing. Whether we're talking about developers, or we're just talking about the growth of a company. Because one of the things, again, I'm not trying to pick on Sean, and neither of these things are right or wrong, but we were talking about some of the companies that we had worked for, and he had even talked about Flink, and he wouldn't want to work for a company like that again. And maybe that's because of other issues with the boss and stuff like that. But we were talking about even our current company, how it was small, and at the time they couldn't afford to, they were making good money, but like it wasn't worth the risk of hiring out a 20-person dev team with Scrum Master and everything. And so he had said, I just wouldn't want to work for a company like that. Or, I don't know his exact words. But the fact is, some companies have to start that way. And so that's what I mean. I think there's a place for both types of people, or like both skill sets. One skill set, you have to just get the job done, and it might be quick, it might be dirty. Like hopefully, and I think this is what we're doing, is we write code in a way that can be testable later or refactored to be testable later, but it got the product out and made money. We paid for ourselves, and now it's growing. I mean, it's growing quite a bit.
Do you think, as Sean said, because this is kind of where I wanted to go, we were sort of chasing that rabbit hole of like, how do you convert as a company? But I think what's more important is he said that it's risky to be that type of company. And I think he's right. It is risky.
Oh, sure.
Because you've got this employee that is wearing all these hats and really unique to your company. And if for some reason he or she goes, replacing that's going to be really difficult.
But it's risky to be the other type too. That's what I'm saying. There's risks both ways.
It's risky to be the other type for the business, or
yes, yeah.
Why is that?
Because what if I was like Matco, and I have this new app, and I go and I hire out a nice, whatever the number is, 8-person or 20-person team, and in order to get everything like testable and scalable, the testable scalable MVP is going to take 2 years or whatever. Like that, like, is that in my budget? That's the first question. Second of all, what if it seems like it's in my budget, and so I pull the trigger and I go down that rabbit hole, and they're building it and they're halfway through, and then people quit, or there's a pandemic or something like that. 2 years is a long timeline of not making any money, and that's why in that book, Ready, Fire, Aim, that's that book we read, right? That's kind of what they talk about, getting a product out. Again, like it's product centric versus engineering centric. Both of these things are important, but also maybe they both tug at each other.
So let me clarify real quick, because I know what you're saying, but I think it took me a second, because it's kind of, because I think what you're saying is, I think somebody listening would say, well, Matt, how do you have this big engineering team that takes 2 years to complete a product, but having less people does it sooner? But I know that's not what you mean. I think what you mean is approaching the thing completely differently, not just having a smaller team, but also not fully breaking everything out going into development. You just kind of rapid fire. It's not about the people so much, because that's kind of what we were talking about. We were talking about like the people, and I think what you're talking about is really the way the business approaches development.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And so if you have a team that is not so focused on planning everything out and having all these ceremonies and yada yada, all that they're focused on is really building out that product as quickly as possible. That is high risk, high reward. It's high risk because of your people, but it's also high risk because, I mean, I don't know, like if you don't have the right people, you could really go off and develop the wrong product. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because when you have product owners and stuff, their whole responsibility is figuring out what do your users want. And so I can see how Sean or anybody else that likes that type of work, what they're saying is, I don't know that world. Doing research, user engagement, that's not what I specialize in. Letting somebody else do that and telling me what to develop can be more rewarding and less risky, more expensive, but it could be more rewarding and less risky because you know that the work that you're doing is exactly what the user wants. Whereas on the other side, you let your small team of engineers / product owners / managers / this / that, they're the ones trying to figure out what the user wants, and if they're wrong, that could cost you a bunch of money, waste a bunch of time, and also if one of those people leaves in the process, that's not very good for you as a business owner. Is that kind of what you were saying?
I mean, that's what I'm saying. There's risk both ways. I guess, I mean, maybe even both of these scenarios, like really it does exist on a spectrum, and that's true too. The idea of, regardless of the team size, the idea of Agile and Scrum is an iterative development, right? which is definitely true. But the fact is, it will cost more money to have like what Sean was saying. Again, I'm not trying to pick on him. These are just his examples of having the product team do research, flesh out like full cards, have people like point them properly, like including testing, writing unit tests for all this stuff. Like that first iteration, you're either going to need more people to get it out, like in whatever the 2-week sprint is, or it's going to take longer like you either need, like, in order to get it out in one sprint, you need more people. If you don't have more people, you need longer time. So like the way that a smaller company usually does it is they cut corners. Right. Or at least that's what I've seen. Maybe you don't have as much QA, or like the devs do their own QA, which is kind of dangerous. Maybe the tickets aren't exactly fleshed out. And exactly what our company did, we released an app. Like, that was it. Like you built that first React Native app. We released it just to get something in the user's hands.
Right.
And that cost whatever your salary was times 3 months.
Yeah.
You know, like that. Like, and then we iterated on that. I eventually got hired in that February, and then we just kept iterating. You know, sometimes we went down. Sometimes it is true, we did go down some wrong paths.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so, but like, it again, like it just feels to me, it feels like different stages of a company. Now, as a company gets bigger, like, let me say, when a company is smaller, those little mistakes don't cost as much. I mean, they cost the developer salary, but let's say we have an app that's only making like $100,000 a month, right? And then I write a bug and it kind of messes stuff up for a couple of days. Like, cost maybe isn't that much.
Mm-hmm.
That's different as things scale out and the company scales and the app is making $1 million a month or $2 million a month. Like, that means each day that something goes wrong, it is more expensive. So I think that's where it does feel like there should be maybe not should, but there is an evolution where both scenarios are important,
mm-hmm.
but we can't ignore, like in this ideal scenario that Sean talks about, like, he didn't say that, but like that's just the mental model. But in this ideal scenario, like, that's great if the company has the money to support it, obviously, like Google and Facebook. But when you are a smaller company like Matco, which doesn't exist, I'm just kidding. But like if I'm trying to build an app and I have money for the next 6 months, I'm hoping to get that monetized very quickly.
Right. What I wonder is if there's a way to solve this problem in the beginning, because it feels like everybody just kind of gives up at the word go. They're like, well, if you don't have all of these ceremonies and all of these people, then you're just a disorganized company that's super risky and bound to fail potentially. Mm-hmm. How do you solve that problem? Because, I mean, you can give everybody all these responsibilities, but like executing all of the ceremonies and job responsibilities that you would have in a normal Scrum team with a limited number of people isn't really possible. You can't have the developer that's also playing the role of a product owner and, whatever other roles. He can't be sitting there, like I said, doing all the Scrum ceremonies, setting up all this acceptance criteria. Like, he's just going to be kind of pivoting and moving as he goes. But that's also, as Sean and other people have pointed out, risky and not, I don't even want to say it's not the most efficient, because it can be the most efficient, but yeah, so, it's like risky. So how do you get around that?
So in this book, Linchpin, he talks about it. In the book, he's talking about Seth Godin, the author. Mostly the book is talking to like the employee, and he's saying you should try to be a linchpin at work. That's how you avoid not getting fired. If you're so important that they need you, you won't get fired. A lot of people give him pushback because you can still get fired. That's no matter what. Right? But he also says, hey, secret note to employers. You want your employees to be linchpins. He says that feels risky, but in a difficult time, those are the people that give that emotional labor. Those are the people who take that ownership and eventually that you can count on. And it's that emotional labor that scales.
Right.
Like it's that person putting in that extra effort that scales versus, not to say that people at big companies don't put in that extra effort. I'm just talking about the book right now. But that's where he says it's like that's the thing that isn't cookie cutter.
Right.
Like one of the things about this big system that we were talking about is it. I don't necessarily think that it's more efficient, but it has less. Maybe it has less grit, like as the wheels are turning, because everyone is. In this big hierarchy, you could pick out, oh, is this piece Matt? We can pick him out. We can put in another person. Hopefully they have equal skill, and they just do the tickets. Like, no emotional labor involved.
I think you bring up a good point. It's not that you won't have employees in a big company that want to work hard.
Yeah, of course not.
You probably will, but it seems like the process or the company structure does discourage going above and beyond. Like, they really do want you to stay in your lane, and I think that's because it makes things more predictable.
Yeah, at the very least, because we haven't worked at big companies, the stories that Sean was giving seemed to discourage him. Now he took it the best. He took it the best possible way, understanding like, okay, like I just need to get better at my job, which I like. That's fine, and I love that. I love that attitude. I'm not saying that he did anything wrong, but like, it does seem like, it was discouraging me when I was hearing those stories.
Yeah. Yeah, but like I said, it's good for him because ultimately he becomes the best developer that he can be. He gets that time to focus on that stuff. I guess when the other guys that are working at these startups are putting out these fires on a Saturday night, Sean's sitting there with his coffee learning some new Android architecture or
something
some
like
new
that.
some new edit, which is really cool and really valuable. I just don't know for those that have worked in that startup world. And I guess here's what I told Sean. This is why I feel like I keep getting stuck in the startup world and I'm kind of like not super intrigued by big companies. There's like this, it's like a drug. There's like this dopamine rush from being able to present some solution to a business owner and they're like, yes, this is going to move the needle far. This is going to be a big deal. And when you're in a startup world, every little feature that you do has a much bigger impact than in a bigger company where you're just releasing, small, I mean, I don't want to call them small, like iterative things, but I mean, you're probably going to be in a sprint, you're going to be doing things that have so little value relative to the rest of the project compared to if you're a small company, every little feature makes a big deal. I remember at the company that we're at now, there was just a little piece of tracking software that I wrote when I first got started. And I remember presenting it to the owner and he was like, oh my God, this is going to help me make so many decisions that are going to make us a ton of money. And however much money that helps them make relative to their total revenue is much bigger than the little button change that you do on some Walmart app or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe it'll make a big deal for the Walmart app and maybe it's a ton of money, but relative to the total revenue that the company's bringing in, I feel like it's a lot smaller.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know how to quantify that. And maybe it is just an ego thing because you had mentioned it's like a drug.
Yeah.
So maybe it is like that good feeling of ego, but I feel that too. When I'm working on something, this is it. A couple of my companies have been small, or even that the school that I worked for, the campus that I was on was small. So everything that I did was like that Matt did that.
Yeah.
Right? And like maybe if you're working at Facebook or if you're working at Walmart and you optimize, I don't know, a piece of the cart, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That might have like an important value for like the bigger picture. But like, yeah, I do like that feeling of, oh, we got this tracking in, or now we can sell this thing, or we got these in-app purchases in. These are like big, obvious features, but like we got that in. Now we're making money. Now we're tracking that money, and like at the very least, that feels great. And then it feels cool, like you said, when the business owner is paying attention,
right?
Like and like
to your work,
you're directly interacting, and it's like you can feel, or at least that's the way I feel. You feel really involved in that, and I mean, we can talk about this too. The ownership of the code base.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. I think there's something to be said about being on the front end of the development of some big company. I mean, you hope that the company that you're working for is going to get really big, and it's really cool to be able to look back and be like, I was on the team that started building that software.
Yeah.
Versus I jumped into the Walmart code base 100 years after the company came out, whatever. And I helped them change a few things. And I mean, I guess that's cool to show people. I guess it would be pretty cool to show people changes that you made to the Walmart app. But I don't know, you're just, like you said, you're like kind of just a cog in the bigger machine. And you don't have a ton of ownership over the code base. You didn't really write it. You didn't architect it. I think that's that ego or dopamine rush. And usually we're against that. Usually, obviously, we speak out against that ego thing. So I'm not sure.
Well, I think... Because me and my wife talk about this as well. I keep doing this with my hands. But me and my wife talk about the concept of ego. And she kind of disagrees. And like I think ego is bad when it makes me interact with somebody else in a negative way.
Mm-hmm.
But ego can be the thing that drives you.
Sure.
Right? And if it's just like your own internal, like, I'm going to squat, 350 today. Why? Because I'm going to do it.
So we'll be the best.
Yeah. And so like that thing, like that, we can call that ego, that thing that's driving you to do that, or like I don't think there's anything wrong with that. There is ego when I don't want to listen to you because, hey, I have 10 years experience, or I mean, I am older than you. Like if I came into work and said, well, I'm like 10 years older than you, so you need to listen to me. Like that would be bad on me. That would be bad on me. And so I think that's where I don't like the ego. But ego driving you to do stuff in a non-negative way, I don't think that's bad.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to call it ego because they are kind of two different things, or at least in the way that like Jocko talks about it. Jocko talks about ego in the way that like it clouds your judgment.
Yeah.
But if you can increase your ego in a way that doesn't make you make poor judgmental decisions, then I guess it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, Jocko has that book, Dichotomy of Leadership, and he talks a lot about the dichotomy, and he says that kind of same thing. Like, you don't want to have ego, but you also don't want to just be like a drugged out bum on the street, like where it's like, oh, I just don't care. I don't care about what people think about me. But like, you don't want to be that person who's a drugged out bum on the street, just like, well, I'm going to do like heroin all day. Because why?
Let's call it pride then. It's pride in the code that you write and the team that you work on. And usually at the beginning of a company, that team is real tight knit, and there's something cool about that, I guess. When companies get too big, I don't imagine that one of the engineers at Google gets to talk all that much to one of the lead designers or something like that. So I guess that's cool too. I guess that's the thing is like, especially if you're privileged to work for a company that makes it from that startup phase into that bigger phase, which is kind of where we're at right now, you get to see the whole spectrum, which is really cool.
That would be cool. Yeah.
You get to see like all of the development that goes into building a successful company. Then you get to see as it grows, how does that relationship that you have with people change? How does your relationship with your work change? How does your work specifically change? And there's something cool about that. I know that everybody that works for a startup is not going to be privileged to work for a company that does that, but I don't know. I could see how somebody, maybe this is where Sean was. Maybe you and I feel this way because we've been lucky to work for a startup that find success.
Successful. Yeah.
There's a lot of people, and maybe Sean, like the company that we worked for last, that could be a real bummer. You're like, if this is what this is like, I don't want anything to do with this.
That's fair. That's a good point, because he went from Flink, which just sounds like nothing worked well, directly to Comcast, which he was talking about. He's like, that was great. I loved getting that, and that's fair. And he probably gained a whole bunch of skills, like we were talking about this as well, being able to learn from senior devs how to do like whatever, like Android in his case, right, and mine too, like learning from senior Android devs, here's how to do it correctly, getting to see that code base, like being impressed, learning a lot, and like having it be like a well-oiled machine. Yeah. Compared with Flink or compared with some of the other companies I've worked for, that does sound good.
Right. One point that Sean brought up in the last episode that I kind of want to bring back up is that he said that when he worked at Flink, because he was like the only Android developer, nobody really had eyes on his code, it gave him a really good opportunity, and nobody was really using it. It gave him a good opportunity to kind of mess around, make mistakes, and kind of like learn from those mistakes, which is cool. The thing that he did next is go to Comcast, where he was forced to do things the right way because he had other eyes on his code. One thing that a guy told me at work the other day is he said kind of the plague of the developer community is that you've got a bunch of developers that weren't forced to learn to do things the right way through school, and they were also never passionate enough to figure it out themselves. Yeah. And also maybe they never worked for a company where they were forced to do that. Mm-hmm. If you just live in the startup world and maybe all you did was a boot camp, you're never going to learn to do things the right way unless you're super passionate about it, and you're forced to, or you're super passionate, which then leads you to want to learn these things. Yeah. So, with Sean being at Flink, if he would have continued down that road, who knows if he would have ever learned like, oh wow, I was really doing these things wrong. Like maybe his passion, I do think Sean was passionate about it, so maybe he's a bad example. But if you're not a super passionate developer and you never leave that startup world, you really may never advance as a developer because you're never forced to write good, scalable, testable code, and you may not even know what that means.
When I worked at, or like when I first came to back to America from Korea, and I went to that job where I took over for an Android developer who had like 2 years of experience or 2 or 3 years of Android experience. And then the iOS guy quit, and that guy had like 4 years of of iOS experience. Yeah. Both of their code was garbage. Mm-hmm. And I think that was because they were probably both used to working like alone. I know the iOS guy was mostly a consultant, so I think he just came onto projects, got something done, and but yeah. So that's the thing is because they were only working alone, they weren't that good.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot by looking at these code bases and because I knew how to program. I had read a whole bunch of books on like architecture and stuff, but I was pretty new to the app world, like mobile world, aside from games, right? And so I was just like, okay, well, actually, even when they hired me, I said, well, I've really only done games, but I said, as long as there's a code base, I can do whatever you need.
Yeah.
And in fact, as soon as I got there, I started doing it better. I was like, yeah, there's lots of examples of that. But yeah, like that, like you said, that is the danger. And we've interviewed people and we've hired some people who have been working on a mobile app for 2 or 3 years, 4 years, and they don't know what they don't know. And
right.
like you said, if they're not motivated to go and get better, they're hurting.
Right. Yeah, there is some danger in if you're a developer, you're dangerous to yourself and you're also dangerous to business owners if all you ever do is go on and maybe even write the first iteration of their code base because then you never know what you're doing wrong. And I'm wondering now if for Sean the change from Flink to Comcast was so profound that he was like, that was the fastest way that I could have learned what I didn't know. And so I would recommend that to everybody. Now, everybody's not maybe like him, and maybe everybody's a little bit different. I feel like I've been lucky to have worked with some senior developers which could correct my ways, but I've also been lucky to be passionate enough about it that, like, if somebody brings something up just in conversation and I don't know something about that, I'm like, okay, I'll definitely go do a little bit of research on that. I'll go figure that out. There may be a ton of things that if I got to work for a big company, I'd be like, wow, I was way off there.
Sure, yeah.
But I don't think that I'm as bad as some of the guys that like we've hired in the past that they literally didn't know the error of their ways and they had no interest in learning it themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the passion just wasn't there.
Yeah.
We kind of even let go of somebody because that passion was completely gone.
Yeah, it was that exact thing. Yeah, again, like that does seem like a big danger, which is why I guess that's why I always emphasize like continuous learning. And like you're not always it's hard like because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And that definitely makes it difficult. So even if you don't have anybody else telling you how to do it better, you can always just think like it's hard. Like if you're not spending time reading or spending time studying, like at the very least you can ask yourself, how can I make this better?
Yeah.
Now that doesn't mean you'll always get a chance to implement it, and that's also the unfortunate thing about being on a small team, right? So it's like you have to grow so that hopefully you can iterate on your architecture or something like that.
Yeah. Well, if there's a part of, I think I need to do this a little bit more too. If there's like a part of the development process or the ecosystem that you like keep looking at and you're like, I don't really need to worry about that right now. Maybe case in point, like UI tests. That's something that like for me haven't spent a ton of time doing. Most of the teams that I've worked for have just been like, let's get as much code written as freaking possible so we can keep moving this thing along.
Yeah.
Didn't spend enough time writing tests. Maybe if you're just aware of that, don't neglect it. Just try that. That's the next thing that you need to learn. Don't ever get comfortable with what you know right now. Definitely keep learning those things that you don't know. And there's always going to be something. If you feel like you know everything there is to know about one platform, I don't know, go learn another.
Well, I just think you're wrong, because even that book. So I got a copy of that book that Sean was talking about last week, and I'm excited to go through it. It did just recently get updated. It was like Android application development for dummies, and it's like 6 books in one, which is just like 6 monster chapters. But it's not really 6 books, but like it just got updated for July 2020 or June 2020, and I'm excited to go and read that, because certainly there will be some fundamentals that I didn't know.
Right.
And so again, that makes me excited, because I do actually want to get better constantly.
I think to elaborate on my last point, that wasn't explained very well. I think what I meant is if you go learn some other platform, like I think learning Android development, learning Laravel development made me a better iOS developer, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Getting exposure to, for example, on iOS, you're obviously communicating with APIs all the time. Learning what that looks like on the back end makes you have a better understanding of what the work is that you're doing on the front end.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Well, and and that's a good point. And I would say, we were talking about this earlier. It just feels like different skill sets, right? Like it is that T developer. I assume Sean knows quite a bit, like broad wise, and he definitely knows about like working in Scrum teams, for example. And he probably knows really deep Android development. I'm positive he knows deeper than me,
right?
Actually, right? But he wouldn't necessarily know, and I'm not going to use myself as an example, but for you,
throw me under the bus.
Okay, well, I don't know. I don't know who it is because again, I don't want to. I'm not trying to pick on him. I was really good talking with him.
It's just that Sean. It's hard to have this conversation because we're it's just contrasting and like trying to find the pros and cons of both, but they're really just different.
We're just recapping.
It's easy to use Sean because he was the last.
He was just here. But yeah, that's the thing is, I learned a whole bunch. Even just meeting you, I didn't know anything about creating servers. And again, actually, I have another buddy who's been doing iOS for 6 or 7 years. I don't know. But he doesn't know anything about, like, he hardly knows anything about building APIs, even on the app side. Just because like not all of the apps has used it, but he didn't know how to build. He didn't know anything about servers or anything like that. And it was so weird to me. Like, how did these things connect? And it just felt like a big gap. But you showed me DigitalOcean. I started building that, and I just copied a bunch of stuff that you did. And then I would keep, I must have done it like 10 times, where I would build a droplet, do all that stuff to like get it so a Laravel project will work. And then I don't do anything with the Laravel project.
Yeah.
And I just write that script. I wrote that script to like to deploy. And I was like, oh, so it's like, it is cool to dive deep into Android, but for me, it was also just beneficial. We'll see if it's beneficial in the long run or not, like money-wise, like job-wise. But like, it was interesting to do like a medium dive into how do I build servers and how do I do this back-end stuff.
Yeah.
And I've also constantly kept up with iOS. Like me and you jump back and forth on the current project, but also I built that game engine just because I was like, what's Metal? I don't know how Metal works versus OpenGL, and I spent like 3 months building that iOS.
That engine. Was super cool. That the engine that you built.
Yeah, I haven't done anything with it. We want to make some games with it, but like it's just fun, different experiences, and so, none of that is wasted. That's also a fact. None of that is wasted.
Now you can go into a conversation where people are talking about managing. Now if DevOps comes up in general, you may not be an expert, but you know a little bit about it. You can kind of engage in that conversation. You came out of that knowing how to write scripts, which is pretty cool. One other thing, though, you remember Sean talking about in the last conversation about resumes and like tailoring your resume to the job. Yeah. That was him, right?
Yeah, that was him. Yeah.
Okay. So the thing is that I'm thinking this could be a potential benefit of being like a cross-platform, multifaceted developer, is that the world does need really specialized people.
Yeah.
And if you are the best Android developer out there, there's definitely going to be work for you, and more power to you if that's you. But if you know a bunch of different things, unfortunately, you won't ever be that super, super specialized. I do believe that. Like, if you can't devote all of your time to one thing, you're never going to be as good at any one of those things. That's just the reality of it. But at least there's a lot of job opportunities available to you, especially if you are willing to take the time to tailor your resume to the job. Like, if you feel comfortable with Laravel or something like that, then you are able to kind of tailor your resume to that and feel comfortable applying for those jobs. But you do have to realize that, maybe you're not the best at any one of those things.
Yeah, so like Walmart or Facebook or Google might be looking very specifically for an iOS dev, and they don't care if you know how to like script out like Laravel automation stuff. And so again, like it's just different opportunities, because the other thing is you might meet a friend of your sister's or a friend of your wife's brother or whatever who like has enough money to start a business, and he hears, oh, you can make websites, and you're like, yeah, I can make apps too. And it's like, oh wow, okay, like you're my guy or whatever, you're my girl. I'm gonna take like like so that's a whole separate opportunity because you have this like Scott Adams calls it like your talent stack.
Right.
You just have a different talent stack than somebody who has like, okay, I know iOS and I know it really deep. I know core data. Like I don't know what else because I'm like.
I think I'm still in that phase where, especially because I'm young, I'm still in that phase where like I don't know what I think that I'm starting to realize that I love iOS development and I really do want to pursue that. But like when I work on backend stuff, especially Laravel stuff, even little node projects, I love that kind of stuff.
Me too,
I get really into that stuff. Maybe I like it just as much as iOS. But I guess for me right now, it's all about like discovering what it is that I really do enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And being exposed to all that stuff obviously helps with that. I also feel like my mind personally just wanders. Like I hear people talking about like, especially other developers or business owners talking about different technologies and stuff. Like I hear the back end guy discussing the API stuff and I just like my mind wanders.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I have to know what that looks like. Like I really, really want to know. I don't have to learn all the frameworks. I don't have to learn all of the languages, but as far as like spinning up like an API or some backend app, like I want to know what that looks like. And then, okay, now that's done. How do I get that onto the internet? How do I put that on a server? Okay, now I got that set up. How does DNS stuff work? How do I get domains up? Like my mind just wanders. And then, okay, now I've got this set up. How do I hook that up to an app? And so I just can't help it. That's just my personality.
So yeah, I think that's mine too.
And a lot of businesses can make good use of that, especially the one that we're at now.
Yeah. So there's that book I always talk about it. So Good They Can't Ignore You, and I really like that because it is about getting specialized. And then there's a lot of books like that. Talent is Overrated. Something I don't know. There's a couple of books about expertise, and to counter that, there is another book that's called Range, and he kind of talks about. He's like, okay, some things are great for being specialized because in a lot of these books they talk about like memorizing a series of numbers or chess. Or like violin as like, see, the best people started really young and just practiced like that 10,000 hour rule. In Range, maybe it's too strong because but that author, something Epstein, I forget, Daniel Epstein maybe, he talks about how there's all these people, like obviously like Leonardo da Vinci, but like I'm not even gonna remember, but he lists a lot of people who didn't necessarily start young at what they did. They just had lots of different experiences, and that's like it was all those experiences they could bring it together in a unique way.
Yeah.
And so like that's something else that we can't necessarily ignore.
Yeah. Or these. I guess I wish that I'd read the book so I know a little bit more about it. But like I'm also wondering if there is a place for like how many times do you meet somebody that whether it's a developer or anything else where they got stuck into some career. And that was just like what they thought they should do whenever they decided to do it, and they hate it. And like this is not what I want to do.
Yeah.
I've even met developers like that where it's pretty clear that they don't like what they're doing, and I just wonder like why not go try some other thing? I mean, especially like it's cliche, but like life is too short to not know what you want to do. Go experience everything, figure out what it is that you want to do, and also it's hard. It's like you talked about before. Whenever you're thinking about learning some new thing, your brain is just like, no, don't do that. That's going to be a bunch of effort. That's going to be a bunch of effort. But really, like, if you want to go learn, especially once you become a decent developer, learning some back-end framework. So, like, you learned how to set up a server in a matter of weeks. Like, no, you're not an expert at it, but you have exposure to it. You get the basic gist of it now. Same thing could go for Laravel or any back-end framework, or maybe like I made a video how to build an iOS app in 7 minutes or whatever, 6 or 7 minutes. Just go do that. Like that'll expose you to it at least.
Yeah. So I do absolutely agree, but I also know, I mean, like the nice thing about the stuff that me and you do is we do constantly learn.
Yeah.
And so at the very least, I'm used to learning. But I also remember the first time at a different job when I was looking at Laravel, and I was like, I don't know. It actually was just a PHP file, and I was like, I don't know. And then I remember getting started, even just doing the Laracast stuff, and I was just like, I don't know, this is tough. And it felt so different. It felt so different than even iOS or Android, or like the C++ stuff that I do. It's like, or even at one of my other jobs, database. Oh, that sounds scary.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I didn't understand what it even was, but I knew that I didn't want to break it. Don't ever type drop table. Okay, I can really ruin something,
Yeah,
it's like in an app you can't ruin anything. If you write a bug, you just fix it and recompile.
Yeah.
Like I'm not talking about live stuff. You can.
I wonder I don't want to get into a whole psychological conversation, but why is the brain like that? Why is it so like, that's scary. Like I don't want to that's a lot. That's a rabbit hole that I don't want to go down right now.
I think it's the same. Yeah, we will talk about psychology because some people have talked about this and they say like the fact is like using brain energy is the same as using like your body energy, like working out, right? Like it uses up calories. And so like your body knows when it's going to go and expend a bunch of energy, and like that's why if you stop working out, you keep down that path, right?
Right.
Whereas like if you're like my wife or what I used to be, and you're used to working out, then you keep up that habit. It's just like, oh, that's the thing that I do is I work out.
Right.
And so I think that learning is the same way. It's like your body actually knows like that's going to be a bunch of work. Like that's going to be like a bunch of energy, mental energy or whatever.
Yeah.
And like that's hard. It is just uncomfortable. And so your body doesn't want to be uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable. I know that feeling.
Yeah. I wonder if it also has that does make sense. I wonder if it also has something to do with like instant gratification though, where you can go chase this new thing and learn this new thing, and you can recognize like the long-term benefits of it, and maybe you'll get some excitement or happiness out of it down the road. But like right now I could go play a video game.
Yeah.
I know that's going to make me happy right now, and I don't have to like go spend a bunch of energy to get that. So like that, I mean, I think that's literally why there's not more successful people in the world. Like there's
or more fit people,
or more more disciplined people. Or I mean, I think that's literally like the definition of discipline is regularly foregoing instant gratification for long-term success.
Yeah.
That's a really hard thing to do.
So there was, I agree. There was this quote when I was a student in this C book, and I'm gonna mess up the quote, but it was basically like the professional, like the amateur programmer, when they're solving this problem, they just see as a temporary solution to finish their current job. The professional programmer sees it as like a building block in their journey, right? So it's like this, even though this is a temporary, or like this particular problem is just temporary, it's building that knowledge so that I can keep going forward.
Right.
And so I remember one of the iOS devs that I took over for, like that person who quit, he was using the deprecated alerts. They were deprecated in like iOS 8, and we were already on like iOS 10 or something like that. And I looked at when he started the project, and they were already deprecated, which means that the moment he typed it, the IDE said, "Hey, this thing's deprecated. Use the new thing."
Yeah.
And that's what I thought about, like the amateur programmer. Like he was just like, "Well, I already know how to do this. Why would I spend time? Like I don't care about learning the new thing," which to me seems short-sighted.
Yeah,
it's like go learn that new thing. But he didn't care about it, and then additionally he hard-coded them like everywhere instead of building like a nicer wrapper around the alert.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of work for me if I want to go and change, because now like instead of having his own kind of like alert wrapper, which like I think we've both done in our projects, he had this deprecated code in like 120 spots.
Yeah, that sucks.
So I was just like, well, I don't want to fix it either.
I worked with a guy that is kind of similar. He would have all these third-party libraries. I mean, he was obsessed with third-party libraries, but he had a bunch of third-party libraries in the project. And he would think that he was doing something good by just like upgrading them, just like updating them to the latest, just without reading anything about them.
Oh, wow.
And it would just kind of break things, and he would just kind of like use the IDE to just kind of auto fix things and stuff. It's just like, dude, go read whatever.
Yeah, what changed? What changed?
Yeah,
like,
what
what's
changed?
The upgrade log?
Should I bring this in? Actually, it worked the other day. I don't know. I think I told you this. For some reason, right now, there's a bunch of like. I think this is purely coincidental, but like 2 or 3 of the libraries that we use, the latest version is actually like broken completely, which is like one of them, localization is broken if you use the latest one, just stuff like that. But I figured that out because I sat there and read through it. I mean, the way I see it with these third-party libraries, you don't have to write all of that code, which is really nice. But if you want the new functionality, all you got to do is like read what it. You don't have to write it. It's all there for you. It's free. Just go read what it is that you're bringing into the project. So, anyways, there was a guy that I worked with that was like that too, and it was just like, just had no interest in making sure that the project was as good as possible or that the latest update solved the problem that he wanted. It was just like, just bring it in.
Yeah.
I think at some point you get really excited as a developer about reading that stuff and learning new things, and eventually you can learn to get the dopamine from that.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I think I get more excitement from learning something new than playing a video game, for example.
Oh, definitely, me too. I used to say when I created my first, I guess it wasn't my first, but it was my first Android game. When Android Studio first came out, I built a game, and I remember saying, like, at the time I played a lot of Batman, like Batman Arkham City, and on some of the challenge maps, I was like 30th best in the world. Like, I really played that game a lot.
That's crazy.
And but I remember saying, although it sounds like I'm bragging about that, I'm not. I feel like that's a waste of time. But I felt more proud about this game that I built that like 30 people downloaded as compared with like being really good at a video game.
Yeah.
And so I kind of it just fell off.
I built my stupid little video game that actually has found some success. The game has like 60,000 downloads,
That's
which
crazy.
I'm super freaking proud of. But it's like the dumbest game, but I had so much fun doing that. And now if I have a conversation with somebody about Sprite Kit, hey, we can have a conversation. I know what that looks like. And I had a really good time with it. I just don't find... Sometimes I do play video games. It was funny because you and I talked about this, I think, a couple weeks ago, where very... coincidentally, we were both out of character and just had to like sharpen the sword, just felt mentally exhausted. And so sometimes you do have to do that. I think that's what you're talking about. I don't know what it is about the brain that eventually gets so overwhelmed that sometimes you do just have to decompress, but sometimes you do. And I came back after that week of just playing video games all week feeling like super, super refreshed, super excited about whatever other thing I was going to do.
Well, that's why we're going camping this weekend.
Yeah.
That's exactly why me and my wife, I said, okay, let's take a little vacation. Here's what else. Exactly what you were saying reminds me of when I was young, and I think all young guys maybe say this. You play some video games, you play some RPGs, and you always say, I wish life was like an RPG. Like, what level fighter am I?
Yeah.
Like, what level guitar am I? Right? And it's like, okay, well, that doesn't exist, but it does. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if I go to the gym and I lift weights every day, if I bench press every day, that will go up, and that's actually like it's a hard number.
Yeah.
Right? But like, so my programming, like, I don't know if I'm like a level 7 Android developer and like a level 4 iOS developer or whatever. So like, we don't have those numbers. But the fact is, if I sit and work at it every day, I am leveling up.
Right.
I'm leveling up. And every time I build an app and get out a new feature, really every experience, the experiences we're having with like going towards Scrum, like it work or whatever, like every time we build some feature, I built some small feature on the Laravel project. I've done a couple of stuff, not as much as you, but like that's leveling up. And so if you also think about it like that, like that's way cooler.
Yeah. I think something about the human brain is just super curious, and you have to satisfy that curiosity regularly to like kind of nourish that. But if all you ever do is just like, maybe that's one of the things that causes people to kind of get in a little bit of a rut, is like, they just keep satisfying that like need to produce dopamine or relax or whatever by just playing video games or something. But like, I don't know, I just think people are curious, and it's like you said, if you want your life to be like a video game, go find something to level up. And you can measure that directly. I mean, I hate to be like this, but you can measure your success directly with money or whatever. If you have a really good career and you're making good money, like that's a good measurement for success. I think Elon Musk feels like level 100,000.
Yeah. Well, the hard thing is, like, I forget what the game was. I think it was like Final Fantasy 14, the MMO version. One of my roommates played that at the time. And when you first start out, this is true about a lot of these RPGs. When you first start out, you are killing rabbits or whatever. You're fighting rabbits or whatever. You're going and collecting 7 berries, and it's like it's boring stuff. It's not hard, but like you want to be fighting the dragons.
Yeah.
Right? And in a way, it's kind of like that with learning anything, programming or guitar or whatever. Those first levels, level 1, 2, 3 to 10 or whatever, they suck and they're hard.
Yeah.
And it's just like, and that's the thing is like, no matter how you learn, you open up that first Android project and you don't know about programming, you're in over your head. You know? So like, people try to write books like that, but the problem is you're a level 0 Android developer and you want to become whatever level 100, but you're only you're still only a level 3 learner.
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well. And that's the thing,
Yeah.
you got to level up your learning skill too.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. That's a really cool point that you made because I've actually thought a lot about. I don't want to pick on my cousin, but like, I've thought a lot about like video games, especially like RPGs, like maybe World of Warcraft or RuneScape or something like that. I hope the video didn't just cut out. We'll figure it out. We're almost over, anyways. Cool. But like my cousin plays World of Warcraft. I used to play it, like RuneScape, stuff like that. Those games require like straight up grinding, hours and hours and hours and hours of your life. Like I think my cousin, when he finally got to like the max level recently, he had spit out whatever number it was because it'll tell you like how many hours you played this game.
Oh yeah.
And it was like, it was something crazy, like 2 weeks of his life, but like in pure hours, not like 2 weeks, like whatever amount of hours that is.
Yeah.
It's just like
168 times 2. There's 168 hours in a week.
Yeah,
so and that times 2.
And if you ask him, he'll tell you like, I had to grind it out. Like it was just hours and hours of doing this repetitive task to get better and better and better. So it's like, if you can do that in a video game, that's proof right there that the human brain likes that. It likes to sit there and grind on things and learn things and get better and like.
Yeah. You do have to grind, but the thing is, games are also, especially like MMOs, they are designed with those little dopamine drops.
Yes.
And in real life, learning Android programming or whatever, those are fewer and far between, and
but bigger.
They are. Well, no, I absolutely agree with that. I think that is better because it's a real accomplishment. But if all you're doing is tutorials, right, which is people get stuck in, like tutorial cyclone or whatever they call it. Then like it might not feel like you finish the project with almost the same understanding as when you start it because you're just following the tutorial. Yeah. And so it doesn't feel like that much dopamine.
Yeah, that's a good point. I just think that if you can devote that much of your life to something like a video game where in principle it's the same thing, grinding and just continuing this task over and over again to get better at it, to level up, I think you can apply that to something better than a video game. Something that you're proud to show people. Nobody's proud to show their max level World of Warcraft character to anybody but I guess another World of Warcraft player. And that's not real life. And obviously, that I guess that's the part that sucks is you can only show it to people that participate in this fake world. If you have a really cool skill like Android development, that's admirable to anybody in the real world, which is literally everybody. And there's something really cool about that. I just remember as I was learning programming and as I got better at iOS development, like showing people and people thinking like, wow, this dude's smart. Like he's figuring this, like that's so cool. That was really big to me. That felt way bigger than any video game that I've ever played.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So I don't know if this will wrap it up, but that book, So Good They Can't Ignore You, comes from an interview with Steve Martin, who is a comedian. And in that thing, like in this interview, like the reason he says that is because like that was his goal for being successful. And then one follow-up he said, he goes, well, I just thought if I was playing the banjo for 40 years, at the end of that, I'd be really good.
Yeah.
Like that was Steve Martin's attitude. And that's how he approached his comedy as well, trying to get better every single day. So like him, a successful comedian, he just recognized the necessity to grind it out.
Yeah. I think that's a good place to end it.
Cool.
I think that's a good place. And, did you say this is 15 or 6? This is 15.
I think this is 15.
This is episode 15. That felt really quick. I guess if you do really cut it down to an hour, it feels like super, super quick.
Yeah.
It's a cool conversation, though. That was a good pickup on the end of Sean's. Hopefully on the next episode, we're going to have somebody real on again, which is going to be really cool.
Cool. Okay.
Are we going to be able to get your buddy on?
No. Which buddy? I don't know.
I thought you said your buddy, the iOS guy, was going to come on, potentially.
Oh, I haven't talked with him, and he doesn't live around here, so any of my friends would have to be virtual.
Okay, well, we'll figure something out. I know we can find somebody to come on. Cool. Anyways, episode 15. Thanks, guys, and we'll see y'all next week.